After our parents passed away, my sister threw me out and actually smirked during the reading of their will. "Enjoy life on the streets," she whispered as I stood beside the conference table. "I made sure you ended up with nothing." I said nothing. Rain tapped against the windows of the lawyer's office, while the scent of old paper and coffee hung in the air. My suitcase sat beside my chair, the same suitcase I had packed after my sister changed the locks on our family home 3 days earlier. She looked victorious. My brother-in-law chuckled quietly, and even a few distant relatives avoided looking at me. To them, I was already the forgotten child. I could still hear my mother's voice in my memories and see my father's smile, and that hurt more than losing the house. Then the lawyer cleared his throat. "There's one last part," he said, and my sister's smile slowly disappeared. Growing up, I had always been the quieter one. My sister, Vanessa, was 3 years older and had a talent for taking control of every room she entered. People admired her confidence. They mistook it for strength. I was different while she chased attention. I preferred staying in the background, listening more than speaking. Even as children, she loved being praised, and our parents often joked that I was the easy child because I never demanded much. That reputation followed me into adulthood. Relatives assumed I lacked ambition because I rarely talked about my achievements. Friends saw me as dependable but ordinary, and Vanessa treated my silence like weakness. After college, I built my own life quietly. I worked long hours, invested carefully, and avoided showing off. Our parents knew about my success because they were the only people I trusted with those details. Vanessa never bothered to ask. She simply assumed that because I drove an older car and lived modestly, I was struggling when our parents became ill. I was the one taking them to appointments, managing medications, and spending sleepless nights at the hospital. Vanessa visited when it was convenient and made sure everyone noticed whenever she did. Even then, I never complained. After Mom and Dad passed away within 8 months of each other, grief consumed me. But while I was mourning them, Vanessa was already calculating what she believed belonged to her, and for the first time in my life, she was about to learn that silence and weakness were never the same thing. In the weeks after our parents' funeral, Vanessa's attitude changed in ways that were impossible to ignore. At first, it came through little things. She stopped answering my calls and replied to messages hours later with short, cold responses. Whenever relatives visited the house, she spoke as if she had carried the entire burden of caring for our parents alone. I never corrected her. During one family dinner, I heard her laughing softly with an aunt in the kitchen. "Poor thing," she said, referring to me. "He never really learned how to stand on his own." Their voices dropped when they noticed me entering the room. Another time, she handed me a box of old photographs and said with a faint smile, "These memories probably mean more to you than money." The words sounded kind, but the look in her eyes told a different story. Then she began discussing renovations to the family home, as though everything had already been settled. She talked about tearing down Dad's workshop and converting Mom's garden into a swimming pool. I still remember staring at the evening sunlight falling through the living room curtains, hearing her make plans while our parents' favorite records sat untouched nearby. She never once asked what I thought. Whenever I paused, she interpreted it as surrender. Whenever I stayed calm, she mistook it for defeat, and each time she gave me that satisfied little smile. I noticed something strange. She seemed far too confident, almost as if she believed she had already won. That certainty would eventually become the biggest mistake she ever made. The moment I realized enough was enough came 3 days before the will reading. I returned to the family home to collect some of my clothes and a few books Dad had given me years earlier. My key no longer worked at first. I thought I had used the wrong one. Then I noticed the new lock. Through the glass, I saw Vanessa standing in the hallway. She didn't open the door. Instead, she folded her arms and gave me a small, satisfied smile. "You should have called first," she said through the door. "Things have changed." I stood there in silence, feeling the cold wind against my face, while the porch light reflected off the rain-soaked steps where our father used to sit every evening. That house held 30 years of memories, and she had locked me out, without a second thought. As I carried my suitcase back to my car, something inside me changed. Not anger, not hatred, clarity. For years, I had mistaken keeping the peace for protecting family. But family didn't throw each other away, so I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining, and when the day of the will reading arrived, I walked into that office knowing something Vanessa did in single quotes too. Sometimes, the quietest person in the room already knows how the story ends. People often assume revenge begins with anger. Mine began with patience. After Vanessa changed the locks, I didn't threaten her or argue with anyone. I simply checked into a small hotel and focused on handling what needed to be handled. Years earlier, my father had taught me something important. Never make decisions when emotions are louder than facts. So I followed his advice. As a financial consultant, I had spent years helping businesses manage investments, contracts, and long-term assets. I understood the importance of documentation, confidentiality, and timing. More importantly, so had my parents. Months before they passed, both of them had insisted on putting everything in order. I had driven them to meetings with their attorney, organized paperwork, and watched them discuss every detail with clear minds. They wanted peace, not confusion, because of attorney-client privilege. I never knew the exact contents of the will, but I trusted my parents completely. That trust allowed me to remain calm, while everyone else made assumptions. Vanessa celebrated too early, relatives whispered, and I simply waited. By the time we entered the lawyer's office, I had already made my decision. No matter what happened, I wouldn't fight. I would let the truth speak for itself. And sometimes, truth delivers the most unforgettable kind of justice. The room fell silent after the lawyer said, "There's one last part." Vanessa's confident smile returned for a moment. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms, certain that whatever remained couldn't possibly matter. Then the lawyer opened another folder. "I have been instructed to disclose information that Mr. and Mrs. Harper considered deeply important," he said calmly. He turned toward me. "Over the last 12 years, your parents were aware that their son had built a highly successful financial consulting firm and had accumulated assets far exceeding the value of the family estate." Vanessa frowned. The lawyer continued, "According to the verified records provided, his net worth currently exceeds $23 million. The sound of a coffee cup slipping from someone's hand echoed through the room. Vanessa's face lost all color. "But that's impossible," she whispered. I said, "Nothing." The lawyer wasn't finished. "Your parents specifically wrote that they hoped this information would remind both children that character matters more than appearances." For the first time that morning, Vanessa looked at me, not with superiority, not with pity, but with disbelief, and as tears filled her eyes, I realized something. She hadn't lost because I defeated her, she had lost because she never truly knew me. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The same relatives who had avoided my eyes earlier suddenly seemed fascinated by the papers in front of them. My brother-in-law sat frozen, and the aunt who had once called me poor thing couldn't bring herself to meet my gaze. Vanessa remained in her chair, staring at the table as though the world she had carefully built inside her mind had collapsed all at once. But money wasn't what shocked everyone. It was the realization that they had judged me so completely and been so wrong. In the days that followed, a few relatives reached out with awkward apologies. Others stayed silent, embarrassed by their own assumptions. Vanessa called several times. I never ignored her, but I no longer rushed to repair what she had broken. Some wounds deserved honesty before forgiveness. Looking back, I understand that losing my parents taught me something far more valuable than wealth. People reveal their true character when they believe you have nothing left to offer. And that's why this story matters. Because sooner or later, everyone encounters someone who mistakes kindness for weakness. The mistake isn't being underestimated. The mistake is believing that your worth depends on what others are willing to see. A year has passed since that day in the lawyer's office. The pain of losing my parents never disappeared, but it became quieter, like an old song playing softly in the background of life. I sold the hotel room memories and bought a peaceful house overlooking a lake. The kind of place my father used to dream about during his retirement. I planted roses in honor of Mom and built a small workshop where I could remember the evenings we spent together. Business continued to grow. But I no longer measured success by numbers. I measured it by peace. Vanessa and I speak occasionally. Time has softened some wounds, but trust returns slowly. I learned that forgiveness and reconciliation are not always the same thing. More importantly, I stopped seeking approval from people who only valued what they could see. My parents had left me something far greater than money. They left me their principles, their kindness, their quiet strength, and perhaps that was the final lesson hidden inside their legacy. Because in the end, the greatest revenge was never making my sister suffer. It was living so well that I no longer needed anyone to regret losing me, and I think that's exactly what Mom and Dad would have wanted.